The slap stung my cheek with a force I never expected from a 15-year-old boy. My glasses flew off my face, clattering loudly against the polished floor of the reception hall. 80 guests went dead silent. The music abruptly stopped. Standing right in front of me, my grandson, Tyler, was red in the face with rage, his hand still suspended in the air. "Give me the keys to the condo," he demanded, raising his voice so the entire room could hear. "My mom says it's ours now, and you're going to a nursing home. Give them to me, you selfish old bat." I turned my head slowly. A few feet away, my son, Julian, was staring intently at his own shoes, completely incapable of intervening. Next to him stood his new bride, Kelsey, in her pristine white dress. She didn't make the slightest move to reprimand her son. In fact, a faint smirk of satisfaction tugged at the corner of her mouth. They were waiting for me to break. They expected me to cry, or, out of sheer public embarrassment, to open my purse and hand over my entire life. I didn't. I calmly bent down, picked up my glasses, and slid them back on. My cheek was burning, and my hands were shaking from the sheer shock of it. But my mind had never been clearer. "You're not getting those keys, Tyler," I said, my voice so low and steady that the boy actually took a step back. "And you too," I added, locking eyes with Julian and Kelsey. "Have just crossed a line you can never uncross." I turned on my heel and walked toward the exit. No one tried to stop me. As I made my way down the carpeted hallway toward the parking lot, I pulled out my cell phone. I dialed the only number I needed right then. "Marcus," I said, the second he picked up. It happened exactly like we thought. "Bring it to the hall. It's time." I leaned against my car in the cool night air, taking a deep breath. I knew my son's celebration was about to take a drastic turn. 30 minutes later, a tall man in a dark suit walked through the glass doors of the venue. To understand what went down that night, you have to rewind a couple of months. Tyler's outburst wasn't just a random teenage tantrum. It was the result of weeks of poison planted by Kelsey. Julian and Kelsey had been living together for years, but they finally decided to get married to make it official. From the moment they announced the wedding, I noticed a shift in their attitude. They would come visit me at my condo, a spacious, sunlit place right outside the city that my late husband and I had worked hard to pay off, and they started treating it like a furniture showroom. Kelsey would literally measure the walls with her eyes. "This living room would really open up if we knocked down that wall," she murmured one afternoon, thinking I was out of earshot in the kitchen. Julian just nodded along. Weeks later, the passive-aggressive hints started. They'd constantly bring up how hard it must be for a woman my age to clean so many rooms, how dangerous the building's steps were getting, and how they'd heard of a lovely, quiet community where they take care of seniors. I'm not a woman who argues. I observe. And what I observed was my son quietly trading away his mother's hard-earned assets to appease a woman who refused to work for her own. So, I didn't wait around to become a victim. 2 weeks before the wedding, I quietly moved my funds into a secure, single-name trust. Then, I called Marcus, an old family friend, and my financial manager to help me get my affairs in order completely under the radar. See, I was the one paying Julian's car insurance. I covered a good chunk of Tyler's private school tuition. And, as my wedding gift to them, I had left my credit card on file with the venue to cover the catering and the open bar. They thought I was just a naive, aging woman they could push around. What they didn't know was that before I even zipped up my dress for that wedding, I had already changed the locks on my own front door. From the parking lot, I watched Marcus walk into the venue. He wasn't a cop or a lawyer. He was just my trusted financial guy and the bearer of cold, hard reality. I watched through the glass doors as he bypassed the whispering guests and walked straight up to the head table. He stopped right in front of Julian and Kelsey, pulled a manila envelope from his briefcase, and handed it to my son. "Good evening, Julian," Marcus said in a neutral tone, just loud enough for the neighboring tables to catch. "Your mother asked me to deliver this to you." Julian opened the envelope with trembling hands. Kelsey leaned over his shoulder, her brow furrowed. There were no lawsuits or complicated legal jargon inside. There were only 3 things: the spare set of Julian's car keys he had given me to hold on to, the cut-up authorized user credit cards I used to fund, and the final invoice from the banquet hall with a handwritten note from the venue manager. Kelsey turned ghost white as she read the paper. "What is this supposed to mean?" she snapped, completely losing her composure. "The catering was already paid for." "Lorraine covered the deposit," Marcus clarified, adjusting his suit jacket. "But after the events of this evening, she has removed her card as the guarantor for the rest of the event and the open bar. The manager needs you to settle the remaining $4,500 balance right now, or they will be shutting down the food service." Julian's eyes darted toward the glass doors, searching for me. He looked absolutely panicked. For years, he had relied on my invisible financial safety net without even realizing it. "Also," Marcus added, gesturing to the chopped-up plastic in the envelope, "the auto-pay for your car insurance and Tyler's tuition have been permanently canceled. Have a good night." Marcus turned around and walked out, leaving them to drown in the mess they had created. The next morning, I poured myself a mug of black coffee and sat on my living room sofa. The condo was beautifully, perfectly silent. My cheek had stopped hurting, though a faint yellowish bruise was forming near my cheekbone. Around 10 o'clock, I heard a commotion at the front door. Someone was frantically jiggling a key in the deadbolt, forcing it, and muttering in frustration. "I'm telling you, this is the right key, Kelsey, but it won't turn." I heard Julian's stressed voice through the wood. "Well, push harder. We have to get her stuff out before noon. The movers are charging us by the hour." I stood up slowly, walked over to the entryway, and pulled the door open, keeping the heavy chain lock securely in place. Julian and Kelsey jumped back. Kelsey literally had flattened moving boxes tucked under her arm. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice smooth and calm. "Mom," Julian swallowed hard, shifting uncomfortably. "We came to talk about last night, and, well, Kelsey and I figured it's best for everyone if you just move out today. We already found you a room at a nice assisted living place. The key doesn't work because I had the locks changed yesterday morning." "Julian," I replied, completely brushing past his ridiculous proposal. "And no, I'm not going anywhere. This is my house." Kelsey stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "You can't do this to us. We had to borrow money from my parents to pay the venue last night. Tyler is traumatized. You promised us this condo. I didn't promise you a damn thing. You two made plans with property that doesn't belong to you," I said, staring her down. "And tell your son that the next time he decides to lay his hands on someone, he better make sure it isn't the person bankrolling his life," before they could get another word out. I shut the door and slid the deadbolt home. The following days were a harsh lesson in survival for my son. For years, I had smoothed out his life in ways he never even noticed. I paid his medical premiums. I'd drop off heavy loads of groceries just because. And I always bailed him out when Kelsey maxed out their budget on nonsense. The second I shut off the tap, reality hit them like a freight train. On Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Julian. "Mom, please, talk to me," he pleaded, sounding utterly exhausted. I went to pick up the car from the mechanic and my card declined. The shop won't let me take it. I need to get to work. I was out on the balcony, watering my orchids. I felt that familiar, sharp tug in my chest, the maternal instinct that screams at you to fix your child's problems. But then the image of Tyler slapping me and Julian staring at the floor flashed in my mind. "It's your car, Julian," I said, gently snipping a dead leaf off a stem. "You'll have to ask for an advance at work or figure out the bus schedule." "But Mom, Kelsey is furious. We had to cancel our honeymoon because we're broke from the venue bill. We don't even have rent money for this month. We thought we'd be living in your place by now. You can't just abandon us like this." "You are two healthy, capable adults. You both work. It's time you manage your own lives. You're my mother. You're supposed to support us. I supported you by raising you and putting you through college. I am not obligated to fund your wife's delusions of grandeur or tolerate your stepson's violence. Have a good afternoon. Julian." I hung up. I turned my phone off entirely and went inside to make some lemonade. For the first time in years, I didn't feel a knot of anxiety in my stomach over my son's financial messes. I just felt a deep, liberating peace. By the weekend, I decided to get back to my normal routine. I went down to the local farmer's market to pick up some fresh produce and flowers. It was a tight-knit neighborhood spot where most of the vendors knew me by name. I was picking through some heirloom tomatoes when I heard fast footsteps behind me. Lorraine. I turned around and found Kelsey standing there. Right next to her was Tyler, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, staring at the ground with his usual defiant scowl. Kelsey plastered on a painfully fake, understanding smile, but her eyes were cold. "I'm so glad we ran into you," Kelsey said, pitching her voice up so the women at the next stall could hear. "Tyler came to apologize to you. He knows he acted out at the wedding. It was just all the stress from the move." I looked at the teenager. He was loudly smacking his gum and refused to even make eye contact with me. It was glaringly obvious his mother had dragged him here to publicly guilt-trip me into submission. "Sorry," Tyler mumbled under his breath, kicking at a stray piece of gravel. Kelsey looked at me expectantly, clearly waiting for me to melt. "Hand over the credit cards. And hand back the keys to my home in exchange for that empty, pathetic apology." "I hear you, Tyler," I said evenly, handing my cash to the tomato vendor. "But actions have consequences. A forced apology doesn't erase the disrespect you showed me." I grabbed my tote bags. Kelsey's fake smile instantly vanished. "He's just a kid," she hissed, stepping into my personal space. "Stop holding such a grudge. Julian is super depressed. He's barely sleeping. If you could just float us some cash for this month." "My answer isn't changing." "Kelsey?" I interrupted, staring her dead in the eye. "Stop looking for shortcuts. You are going to have to work for your own life." I turned my back on her and kept walking down the aisles of the market, leaving her standing there speechless. When manipulators realize they can no longer control you, they try to control how everyone else sees you. Kelsey and Julian went to work spinning a web of rumors through the family. They told everyone I was going senile, that I was losing my grip on reality, and that I had kicked them out onto the streets in a fit of dementia. One afternoon, Diane, my late husband's sister, knocked on my door. She looked deadly serious, her arms crossed tight over her chest. "Lorraine, we need to talk. Julian called me crying yesterday. He says you're acting incredibly erratic, that you cut them off out of nowhere, and even changed your locks. The family is getting really worried about your mental health." I opened the door wide and invited her in. I didn't get defensive. And I didn't raise my voice. I simply walked over to my desk, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out my financial ledger along with a thick stack of stapled receipts. I dropped them right on the coffee table in front of her. Look at them. Diane. Diane frowned and started flipping through the paperwork. She saw the private school tuition payments, the massive mechanic bills I had covered for Julian, the monthly transfers I made to top off their rent, and the huge deposits for their wedding. "Oh my God," Diane whispered, her eyes wide. "You were paying for all of this. Julian told us his company was doing amazing. They were living off my savings." Diane. And their big master plan was to stick me in a nursing home so they could take over this condo. At the reception, the teenager literally hit me across the face because I wouldn't hand over my keys. I turned my head slightly, showing her the faded yellowish bruise still lingering on my cheekbone. Diane gasped and covered her mouth with both hands. "I'm not crazy, and I'm not going senile," I said, quietly gathering up the ledger. I just finally decided that my career as their personal ATM was over. Diane gave me a long, tight hug before she left. I knew she would take care of squashing the rumors. My name was cleared, and I never even had to raise my voice. The following month, reality fully caught up with them, without my secret monthly injections of cash, and with the wedding debt drowning them. Julian and Kelsey were evicted from their luxury apartment. They had no choice but to rent a tiny, run-down place, way out in the suburbs. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, my intercom buzzed. The building concierge told me my son was downstairs. I told him to send him up, but only him. Julian walked into my living room soaking wet, his shoulders completely slumped. All the entitlement and arrogance were gone. He looked like he had aged 5 years in a matter of weeks. "Mom, we moved today," he said, rubbing his freezing hands together. "The place is a shoebox. Tyler is furious. Kelsey cries literally every day. We don't even have enough credit left to buy a new fridge. I know I messed up. I know I failed you. But please, I'm begging you, just loan us a little money. Just until we get back on our feet." I looked at him for a long time. It broke my heart to see my son struggling like that. Of course it did. But I also knew with absolute certainty that if I gave him a dime, Kelsey would take the reins again and the cycle would just repeat itself. I walked back to the guest bedroom and returned with a medium-sized cardboard box. I set it in his hands. "I don't have any money to lend you, Julian, but here are Tyler's old video games, the winter coats you left here last year, and a few heavy blankets for the cold." He looked down at the box, then back up at me. The realization finally hit him. The boundary was totally impenetrable. "Are you really going to let us go through this?" he asked, his voice cracking. "I am letting you grow up, Julian. That is your family, and they are your responsibility. My door is always open for a cup of coffee when you are ready to treat me with respect. But my wallet is closed forever." Julian nodded slowly. He adjusted his grip on the box, turned around, and walked out of my house. That very same week, I decided it was time to reclaim my condo. For years, I had kept the guest bedroom perfectly intact, filled with Julian's old trophies and boxes of his junk, always keeping it ready just in case he needed to crash. Kelsey had actually been planning to turn it into Tyler's gaming room. I hired a painter to coat the walls in a beautiful, calming olive green. I got rid of the massive queen bed taking up all the space and bought a solid wood desk, some gorgeous bookshelves, and an overstuffed reading recliner. I turned the room into my own personal sanctuary. I organized all my gardening books, framed the photos from the trips my husband and I used to take, and set up a little speaker for my jazz records. For the first time in years, the house breathed at my rhythm. There were no heavy, angry footsteps, no constant demands, no passive-aggressive comments about how outdated my furniture was. I started cooking strictly what I wanted to eat. I stopped stocking the overpriced cereal Tyler demanded and the expensive artisan coffee Kelsey insisted on. My expenses dropped drastically, with the extra money that used to vanish into my son's bank account. I signed up for a pottery class a few evenings a week. Even my neighbors noticed the shift. Mr. Henderson from the first floor caught me in the elevator one morning and smiled. "You know, Lorraine, you're looking younger these days. You're standing a lot taller." I just smiled back. He was right. I had dropped a weight I was never meant to carry. I didn't need to hire lawyers. I didn't need to file lawsuits. And I didn't need to plot some crazy, dramatic revenge. I just needed to remember who owned my life and lock the front door. It's been 6 months since the wedding. My life is beautifully quiet now, filled with the routine of my pottery studio, tending to my balcony garden, and grabbing coffee with my girlfriends. I don't see Julian very often. Sometimes he'll swing by on a Sunday morning, sit in the living room, and have a cup of coffee with me. Kelsey and Tyler never come with him, which is exactly how I prefer it. My conversations with my son are brief, sometimes a little awkward. I know he's working double shifts just to keep his head above water. I know he and his wife fight constantly because the money is so tight, but he doesn't ask me for anything anymore. He understands that the boundary is absolute. During his last visit, he walked past the hallway and noticed my new study. He stopped in the doorway, took in the green walls and the reading chair, and just nodded quietly to himself. He knew that space wasn't waiting for him anymore. There wasn't some grand, tearful, movie-like reconciliation. In the real world, the wounds caused by family take a long time to heal, and sometimes distance is the only real medicine. I am not a perfect mother, and he is far from a perfect son. But there is something between us now that never existed before: respect. That evening, after Julian left, I walked out onto my balcony. The sun was just starting to set over the city skyline. I poured myself a glass of red wine, leaned against the railing, and took a deep breath of the cool air. I don't feel lonely. I feel safe. And as I watched the streetlights flicker on below, I reached up and gently touched my cheek, remembering that awful night at the reception hall. It was worth it. Every single boundary I set was worth it. I turned around, went inside, and locked the glass door behind me. Sometimes we grow up believing that a mother's love means endless, boundless sacrifice, that we are supposed to give until we are completely empty, just to keep the family together. But the truth is, your peace is non-negotiable, even when it comes to your own children. Learning to say no, closing your wallet, and fiercely protecting your own sanctuary isn't an act of selfishness. It is an act of survival and self-love. You cannot buy respect by paying off someone else's debts. And a healthy family will never demand that you trade your dignity to fit into their plans. At the end of the day, the greatest act of love we can offer both to ourselves and to them is to step back and let them face the reality of their own choices. It's only when we finally put down the baggage that isn't ours to carry that we can actually breathe in our own homes.